Welcome to Jar of Genius. I'm your host, Russ Perry, and this is a podcast where we dive into the business of creativity. Each episode, I'll explore the minds and stories of innovative leaders and companies who have paved the way and are shaping the future for creative businesses around the world. From groundbreaking business models to extraordinary creative campaigns and the innovations of technology we use and will use ahead, I'm excited to help you not only run a creative business, but thrive in this ever-changing and always challenging landscape. Everyone, welcome to another episode of Jar of Genius. I'm your host, Russ Perry, where every roughly few weeks or so, we're working on the publishing frequency. We're having creative conversations that really try to challenge what you believe in creativity, hearing stories, ideas. And today we have Andy Greenhouse. Andy Greenhouse is the CEO and founder of Swhype. They're a video, marketing, and many other things agency, creating content for brands. Andy, you've been in this business for quite some time. You've also came from a whole other industry, publishing, creative director over Cosmopolitan. And, something that I'm really excited to talk about is just the evolution of creativity over your journey and everything that you've been focused on as you've been in the space a long time. So, and you're across the pond, you're over in the UK, is that correct?
That's right. Yeah. I'm down in Brighton.
Awesome. Well, thank you for staying up late for us today. We have a couple
pleasure.
Team members in London, and it's always like trying to juggle the meeting schedule. It's something we are very aware of. So, Andy, I want to start here. You and I are no stranger to probably the technological advances that are happening in the creation space. But I want to know, as someone who's been creating branded content and storytelling and trying to create those connections with people through the medium of video in many different ways, as you're sitting here today in Brighton, in the evening, what is your quick take on where this space is going as the act of creating is getting digitized, automated, robots might be taking over? I want to know what's going on in your head. Are you worried? Do you not care? Are you excited? Like let's start there inside of this.
Firstly, you don't want to know all the stuff, all the noise in my head, because there's a lot of noise. I think about this a lot the whole time. In fact, where everything is going, where does that leave me? Where do I belong as I age and become irrelevant?
Is it?
I think AI is already really changing the video area, because I work in video generally. I've seen a lot of changes in that sense. Creatively, it's enabling a lot of people who aren't cliche creatives to be more creative. Thinking about using images with things like Mid-Journey, etc. That opens up possibilities for people like me as well, who are looking at storyboards the whole time and trying to work out how we visualize something. Chatting to ChatGPT, brainstorming with ChatGPT, that's an interesting one. And I've found it really valuable in that respect. So yeah, I'm completely fascinated by where we're going with everything, but I don't know if my head can take it all at the speed it's happening. I think that's the thing for me.
I was at a conference last week speaking, and I had the audience. I asked the audience, and I said, it was an email marketing conference. I was kind of blown away that these, like people from around the world were flying to Arizona in June, where it's like 40 degrees plus, and to come here. And I was like, raise your hand if your career goal right now is to become a designer, is to start creating content all day long and running that process yourself. And 0 hands went up. And I was like, you know what? This is awesome, because I think if you've gotten into it, and like you mentioned, try to keep track of it, it's frankly pretty exhausting. it's something that's changing, and you find yourself going down some rabbit holes where, I'm a CEO of a company, and I spent about 6 hours one day a few months ago trying to create something using all AI tools. And I felt like I like blacked out, and I woke up and I was like, what am I doing? Like, why am I doing this? I have teams, I have designers, I'm creatives. And I think for me, like, there's a lot of hype, but people sort of value their time, and even if it is faster, easier to do some pieces, it's a lot of process and separate tools and all of those things. And so I reflect on the same question, and I'm almost sort of like giddy, because I think people are have a little shiny object syndrome right now, but they don't realize to really pull all of this together, it actually still takes a professional and a process. And probably the most important thing, the ideas, the story, the message, which is only going to be as good as what you're putting into it, right?
Yeah, well, I mean, that's the fundamental truth, isn't it? It's like, I think what it's enabled possibly is people who haven't been in that area to discover. If we're talking about creativity, I'm in touch with a lot of people who aren't in the creative, cliche creative space. I call it cliche creative space because I'm a cliche creative myself, but there are people who have discovered that they have tools, I suppose, that enable them to explore that space without fear, whereas before maybe I think you're absolutely right. It takes years of experience to kind of develop the brain muscle sometimes to come up with something that fits a brief, whether that be descriptive in text form, or whether that's a design, or whether that's a video. I'm lucky that I'm sort of doing all of those things. And I never thought I could write. I worked in magazines for years, and I was in the art department. So the art department was, I may be digressing now, so forgive that. But,
that's all right.
But I think for me, I've discovered creativity is, and it's not thanks to any new tools or anything. So now I contradict myself, but creativity for me is all of this stuff. It's starting a business, it's growing a business, it's writing from the heart, it's designing something from a place in my head I can't explain.
I think where you're going, I'll kind of piggyback on it, is it's like there's a lot of parts to creation, and there might be parts that just become really super easy. Like, I think we remember kind of this, the boom of stock media, the boom of photography, the boom of stock video, and everyone was like, gosh, this is horrible, and you're devaluing the industry. And guess what? There's still millions of successful photographers and millions of successful videographers. And so I think there's a shift again, and, we'll see some things change. Like, if your main thing was video, was photography of men and women around a conference table writing on a whiteboard, your business was pretty demolished by stock photography, because all of a sudden there was ample versions of that. But there's all these other places. And I think, like, when one thing becomes very easy, it allows us to be creative and go deeper in other areas. And I think that's kind of where the unknown for me is, but also the excited curiosity to say, well, storyboarding no longer takes all this time, because you literally can prompt it and in an afternoon have everything ready to roll. What then does the energy and time go to make the product better? And I think that's kind of what is yet to be determined inside of this process, where some pieces get easier, but then how do we invest that surplus time, money, energy to then make the final product even better?
Yeah, I mean, so when I talk about storyboarding, I suppose It doesn't make it. I don't think it makes it faster. It just makes those images that are in your head more accessible.
Well,
you know what I mean? So if
yeah.
you're trying to visualize something for a client, then you can hit it after a few goes. And yeah, you're not looking at stock libraries for hours and hours, but maybe you are grabbing something from a stock library and you're gonna stick it in Photoshop with a background that you've got, which is from Midjourney, that's a perfect background. But yeah, I think the time, what you're saying is that the time that this stuff saves us, what are you saying exactly?
I mean, I don't, maybe storyboarding isn't the best example, but I think, if I'm a creative director on a project and I need to, I'll use a very linear example. I need to create a bunch of illustrated assets, things that are very nuanced and detailed. The natural process, as I said, my brief to an illustrator, they give me some concept, takes a few days, we get revised and we get edit, and we're a week or two in and okay, we're good. Whereas today, and like we see this all the time with Design Pickle, you can use one of the generative tools to just say, like, this is where we want to start. And then you send that to the illustrator. And then they're like 80% of the way with the vision before they've even opened up Adobe Illustrator, which means their first round is like almost ready to roll. So that to me, I don't think though, like as many creative processes have adopted it and we're seeing like the macro benefit, but I just feel like there's got to be at some point a surplus inside of the creative process, that all these things that we're taking, time and money, can become faster and easier and cheaper or free. But I don't think that you're just going to sit on that time and energy and money and be like, you know what? I'm not doing anything with it. Let's create 5 more campaigns. Let's do 10 more videos. Let's do, let's create even more with it. Same amount of time, same amount of budget, but now we can multiply our output. And to me, that's, I get excited because I feel like the innovation and the creative ideas themselves will get to some point that is, I think, innovating and pushing the envelope when those resources are in abundance, right? But I don't know, it's like we're two traditional creatives trying to pontificate on the future. So it's definitely open season to see what happens, or everyone just uses robots and we're all out of businesses. So I hope that doesn't happen.
I was working in magazines and it was not looking forward, wasn't ever looking at the industry that I was in. It didn't feel like it was ever looking towards tech. And we had like bolt-on websites and stuff like that, just that there were really innovative companies coming up. And specifically, I was in the women's market, but they weren't. And you know what, Russ, I'm finding this really hard because my brain. So I told you I just come off a ADHD thing, right?
Yeah.
I really struggle with off the cuff kind of conversation stuff, and that is a real thing with me. And if I don't understand the question and I pretend to understand the question, I'm just kind of lying to myself.
Let me ask you this, Andy.
Yeah.
Talk to me about what it's like to be creative with ADHD. Has that been an advantage, a disadvantage? Like, I want to learn more about that. I think that's probably a more deeper, real conversation, which I've never had on this show. And if you're open and willing to talk about it, then let's do it.
Yeah, no, very willing, because it's probably been the biggest problem and the biggest advantage, I think. And it's only a very recent discovery that hasn't been diagnosed, because the diagnosis time is like the waiting list is like 5 years in this country for an NHS thing, diagnosis. So I need to go private, but the thing is, with the way that my brain works, it's not a priority, and it doesn't, that thing doesn't it's not a priority. I've lived with it all my life. I'm 51 now, you know. But I recognize the patterns that it has both prevented me from achieving, and the kind of learning, so it has these incredible disadvantages, and it has these incredible advantages. If I hadn't found drawing when I was a kid, then I don't know what I would have done for a career, because because I just would have been all over the place. I found drawing.
Do you think it helps you ideate and move quicker with the creative process itself?
Yeah, massively, huge. I can't compare it to any other way of thinking, though. This is the problem. So you can only compare your brain to your brain, right? You can only compare it to itself, and you can't really do that anyway.
When did you feel like there was something different that you started to explore? Like you said, you braid your brain, you don't know any different, but at some point you might have been like, maybe there's something unique about my brain. I need to go down this path. Was there a challenge in your life, things that weren't working, or what was the red flag for you?
Yeah, I mean, I always knew as a kid there was like some weird thing that I didn't feel like, I didn't consciously think it, but I didn't feel like other people seemed to feel. And in situations, you know, I was a really shy kid, and I just lost myself in drawing the whole time. And then I was the art kid. And then I kind of found my way through a career which had art at the heart, you know, at its heart. I did graphic design, and then I went into film, and then went into magazine design and art direction and creative direction, and then started my own business. But it wasn't until very, very recently I started writing on LinkedIn daily, about almost 2 years ago now. And it was a way of trying to get stuff out of my head.
Right.
All this stuff in my head. And I remember as a kid thinking, one day I'm going to write all this stuff that's in my head. And, you know, this is when I was like 7, had nothing. I had no knowledge at that point, but I still had this feeling I needed to get this stuff out of my head. And it was through that process, starting to write and finding other people. This is why I was saying about creative people who aren't from my creative sphere, but, you know, people like accountants, people like lawyers who clearly are creative, but actually fell into a different career. So like a more academic career, maybe they were pushed into academia. But for me, it was, I read a post by somebody that I know on there, and it resonated. I had a call with her, and I saw like a mirror held up, you know, not my industry, but similar patterns. From that, I started to do these 12-hour open calls to meet the people I was meeting through words, right? So I called it open. And it was just really about just talking to each other. So
12-hour long call.
Yeah, like a 12. So the idea
like an
is
open
like,
mic.
yeah. I mean, I kind of sit on the end of the camera, on the end of Zoom, and then people drop in, and then they're either talking to me or they're talking to each other, and they're meeting each other.
How did you feeling so many years growing up that maybe something was different or there was off? How did you feel at that point hosting those spaces where people were connecting around this and not feeling maybe so isolated in that space?
So this is interesting because I haven't really spoken about the ADHD side of things. This is more about people resonating to people and tribes resonating to each other. So it wasn't a specifically open to, you know, people with ADHD. I've literally been thinking about that tonight because I've had this ADHD support call. But it was really about people who were looking to talk to the people that they were meeting. And from that, I recognized just the similarities in a lot of people. You know, a lot of people my age, bracketed between sort of, I don't know, 45 and 55 sort of thing. So there's an interesting life change, you know, life stage, things are happening. And we're of a generation that didn't have a diagnosis for ADHD.
Right.
So there's a ton of people who are, you know, under or over the radar. But the way I felt about the calls, amazing. Community, people I identified with, people who identified with me. I was just being myself. I was writing as myself. I wasn't trying to be this person that I thought I needed to be, you know, like this, I don't know, entrepreneur kind of guy that I really aspired to be, because I'd listened to all the podcasts, I'd listened to all the people talking, you know, telling me what I should be doing and trying to do it. God, I've tried to do it over the years. And it's interesting because you do hit these frustrations all the time. And running a business yourself is not like being employed. I realized that.
Oh, yeah.
You know?
I mean, Andy, what's really interesting as I'm hearing you tell a story, which, by the way, thank you for being vulnerable. This is like one of the best podcasts we've done, probably, because we're actually talking about real stuff. And we're not talking about marketing. We're talking about AI. We're talking about that. It's fun. But like what I hear is actually kind of, to me, what the truest form of creativity is that authentic expression of oneself. And it seems like to me, you're still on that journey, digging into that and uncovering that, especially with ADHD and other pieces.
Massively. So I'm so early in it. Well, kind of early in it, but the thing about that call was an ADHD coach came on to that call completely randomly. I had a chat with her. Then I recorded a podcast episode with her about for people who were ADHD curious like me. And then from that, she recommended a book called ADHD 2.0. And then I listened to that on my way to a video shoot up in Edinburgh. So it was like an 8-hour drive. It's nothing to you guys, but to us, it's like a whole day. That's
decent. It's like up to California from Arizona.
Yeah. I mean, and worse weather here. But it was on that, I was listening to this audiobook, and it was the first book I'd ever heard or read. Listening was easier. But first thing that ever really spoke to me, that really, I felt like this was for me. And since then I went to the doctors and got referred, but then I haven't taken it further, because one of the things that I don't know, I can't speak for everybody, but I get racked with self-doubt and, you know, this possibility I might be wrong because somebody in a white coat hasn't said you are this or you are this acronym. Anyway, but it is the self-expression thing that's been huge, massive for me. Yeah, it's really, I've kind of embarked on a lot of sort of personal projects around film and you know, video and stuff, but around community as well. And it's definitely taking me in a different direction. It's not.
Well, let me acknowledge, you and I did not talk about this before. This is an unknown topic, and I'd like to have you consider, the reason you're on this show is actually to talk about this, because you're going to reach a whole other audience that there may be someone who's listening to this. So if you were going to go to someone, like your past self, right? You're listening to a podcast and you would want to share something with someone who's struggling with with you know, the uncertainty and lack of clarity trying to figure this out, what would you share with them to help them kind of discover what you have and find that maybe peace and understanding that has set you on this path?
I think listen to or read, probably listen to, not necessarily that book, but something like find somebody who you think you could maybe talk to. As in, I'm not talking about like a therapist or a coach or anything. I'm just talking about a human who may share that experience, because there will be people, there are people, say on LinkedIn, who are really good people who, are kind of supportive of people who are going through that that discovery period, I guess I would say, because they've been through it. There are people who exploit it, which I don't have time for.
Right.
Wear the label and exploit it and make lots of money off it. There are people who don't do that and are incredibly humble, Andy, and
I don't want to put any pressure on you. But
sorry?
I said, I don't want to put any pressure on you, so feel free to say no. But are you one of those people on LinkedIn that people could connect to and talk to? Is that something that we could post a link to your LinkedIn profile to see what you've been up to?
Well, absolutely, completely. Awesome. But I'm not, in the best position to advise. I can just relate.
Not recommended medical advice coming from Andy, everybody. This is simply a human to connect with who's further down the journey than someone else might be. That's it.
Yeah, I mean, maybe that's the thing. I think it's from, tonight I had, just before I met you, I had my first ever ADHD support group call, which I really felt like I identified with the people on there, and I'd never had a call like that before. Wow. It's a really interesting, because there's a lot of gaslighting. I think that's the phrase where there's a lot of talk about the bandwagon, ADHD bandwagon, people are, diagnosing themselves or whatever, and it prevents you from believing what you think is the truth to some extent. And I think that is what I would say to people out there, because that you will doubt yourself that you're thinking differently, because somebody else will tell you that you are just thinking like everybody else, and there's too much noise in the world anyway, and there's social media and all that kind of stuff. Mm-hmm. But actually, brains do work in different ways, and the world is not set up a lot of the time for neurodiverse brains.
Well, I'll share with you, Andy. I've been sober from alcohol for over 10 years, and my first step in that journey was listening to the voice inside of me that was saying, "Hey, there might be an issue here.
Yeah,
let's take this seriously." And that voice got louder and louder, and I remember vividly my first step was being in a room with people who also were going through what I was going through. And I remember being in tears because I was so relieved to feel like I'm not going crazy. This is a thing. Life's fine. People are all walks of life going through this, and I can talk about it and they understand. So it's super amazing to hear that you're on a journey that I'm excited to follow you on LinkedIn and see where this might become. Maybe you're going to become a new podcast host on a different topic. Who knows?
Yeah, well, this is the one trait I think of ADHD is people do start things. So I did start in COVID. I did start a podcast called Video Talks, which is an audio version of it.
Maybe it's the distracted creative, a story of being creative in the ADHD space. I don't know. We'll come up with some branding later on.
I think there's a lot of creatives in that space. Yeah.
Yes, I do think so
with that
too.
Headspace for sure. Yeah. But
Andy, look, we try to keep these, and I'm going to reaffirm this was actually an amazing episode. I know we were kind of getting to the heart of what maybe is a real topic, but I think our hearts brought us to that right place to share some valuable information. And I think in the spirit of the podcast, talking about creativity, talking about challenges, talking about all that, we nailed it. So I'd love to have you share where people can connect with you, your business, your LinkedIn. What's the best place to connect? Whether or not it's about ADHD, maybe it's just about Brighton and learning more about where you live. But what's the best online spot that you want to send folks?
It's definitely LinkedIn. It's just Andy Greenhouse is my profile, because I'm there every day. I write every day and just kind of write an experiment every day. And then, my company is called Swhype, which is SWHYPE. I don't know why it's spelled like that. We just decided that we wanted something that people couldn't remember. So, reach out. I'd love to hear from anyone.
Awesome.
Especially anyone who's kind of going through similar thing.
Andy, you just made my day with this conversation. I'm loving it. So everyone who's listening, I hope you got some value out of that. I hope you were able to hear and connect with this story. And for any of the links and connect with Andy online, you can go to our website, jarofgenius.com. We'll be publishing that. And Andy, I hope we can stay in touch and hear about your journey, man. Seems like it's the early innings, and I'm really wishing you luck and excited to keep in touch.
Thanks, Russ. Really appreciate it. Yeah, appreciate your time as well.
Thank you so much for listening to this episode of Jar of Genius, sponsored by Design Pickle. To learn more about the topics discussed, get access to any of the links mentioned, and submit ideas for future seasons, head over to jarofgenius.com. Now, if you enjoyed the show, you know the drill. A solid rating on your favorite podcast platform helps others find what we are creating and join the conversation. We'll see you next time, and never forget, creativity is your secret strategic weapon.